and it concerns the Holy Spirit's plan, her purpose in this world. It's a goal of truth. And we can frame it in terms of a problem and a correction. So the problem arises, this is the ego problem, when in any situation that you enter to in your life where you have no clear intention or purpose, you just show up and see what happens. This is very common advice, by the way, too. The correction that we'll read about today is that in each situation, there is a purpose and intention for the Holy Spirit that she has, and the correction is to align with her purpose. So we go from no purpose to the Holy Spirit's purpose. And so there's learning involved in this, because the Holy Spirit's purpose is always a general purpose, and we need to learn to apply that to our specific situations. This can be a little tricky, but it requires learning. So let's say that differently. The Holy Spirit's purpose is abstract and applies to everyone all the time. It doesn't change with people and time and situations. And so when you apply the Holy Spirit's goal to your situation, you take this broad universal truth and make it specific to here and now. And that's where it gets tricky. That's where the ego tries to intervene into the time-space uniqueness of it. And so we'll read about that and how to overcome that. So in reality, this is we're advocating a practice, and the practice always begins before you enter into a new situation, where you clarify the goal in advance and state the desired outcome up front to yourself. And examples of a desired outcome consistent with the Holy Spirit's purpose would be to be helpful, to heal, to forgive, to bring truth, sanity, and peace to the situation. You clarify these, whatever you're feeling in that moment, you clarify it. And now the situation has meaning because the goal has meaning. Rather than entering into a meaningless situation, the goal has meaning, therefore the situation has meaning. And the situation now becomes the means to achieve the outcome that you and the Holy Spirit have joined in. So you're shifting from a blank slate, I don't know what I'm doing here, I'm just was told to come, to a situation, well, the Holy Spirit and I agreed that I would be here to heal, and this situation will give me the opportunity to do that. So very simple advice, but as we'll read, this is a way of shifting out of the ego's delusional patterns and into a meaningful patterns of the Holy Spirit.
The practical application of the Holy Spirit's purpose is extremely simple, but it is unequivocal. In fact, in order to be simple, it must be unequivocal. The simple is merely what is easily understood, and for this, it is apparent that it must be clear. The setting of the Holy Spirit's goal is general. Now he will work with you to make it specific, for application is specific. There are certain very specific guidelines he provides for any situation. But remember, that you do not yet realize their universal application. Therefore, it is essential at this point to use them in each situation separately until you can more safely look beyond each situation and an understanding far broader than you now possess.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to break this first paragraph. I find especially the first paragraph always needs to be kind of unpacked and decoded just so that we all start out on the right, at the same place, and with understanding and not confusion. So we are talking about a practical application of the Holy Spirit's guidance and purpose. It's very simple, unmistakable, and easily understood. So the Holy Spirit sets the goal in a broad, universal way that applies to everyone at all times, to bring peace and love, to bring happiness and healing, to bring truth and understanding. Applies to everyone in every situation, no matter what. So that's easy to understand, very general. Here's what's unique now. We need to prepare for how we can work with the Holy Spirit to make it specific to your situation in time and space. So let's say you're about to apply for a new job. What's your purpose? What's your intention? Make it clear. Are you aligned with the Holy Spirit at all in that? So Holy Spirit will work with you to make her purpose specific, for application of her goal is specific. And there's very specific guidelines the Holy Spirit provides for any situation. None of this is obvious to the ego. This is teaching you how to operate from your soul, from your higher self. So the ego does not realize these things. So what is simple and easy to understand is that it's essential that you use them in each situation. You practice them consistently until you can look beyond the different situations and see a broader pattern that applies at all times to all people. So to forgive and to heal is a broad pattern that applies to all situations and all healing, but that may not be clear initially. So we need to consistently apply it to whatever the situation is, even if it's one that we don't even understand how forgiveness and healing might apply there. But over time, you start to realize that every situation involves, in all situations, there is a lesson God would have us learn. Forgiveness and healing and love and peace, regardless of the circumstances. You can have a flat tire on the highway, and that's an opportunity to learn. Okay, simple enough. Comments or questions? By the way, everything we read about, I think, is quite simple tonight. But as Jim Rohn taught me years ago, if it's easy to do, it's also easy not to do. So you have to determine that you're going to practice that which is easy so that it becomes your default mode. Okay, we'll go on, David.
In any situation in which you are uncertain, the first thing to consider very simply is, what do I want to come of this? What is it for? The clarification of the goal belongs at the beginning, for it is this which will determine the outcome. In the ego's procedure, this is reversed. The situation becomes the determiner of the outcome, which can be anything. The reason for this disorganized approach is evident. The ego does not know what it wants to come of the situation. It is aware of what it does not want, but only that. It has no positive goal at all.
Mhm. Okay, so what we have here is a proposal of a simple way of a self-inquiry, self-interrogation. What is this for? Or simplified, what for? Matter of fact, that's one way of practicing this lesson, this message, is constantly ask yourself, what for? What is this for? And to do so not after you're already in the situation, but to clarify the goal at the beginning so that it's a prayer. What are we doing this for, Holy Spirit? What's this about? At the beginning, not later on. So that's the message for tonight. But now we want to understand why it's important, because the ego's procedure is the opposite of this, where the ego teaches that when you get there into the situation, you'll find out what it's about. In other words, the ego says you can't know in advance what's going to happen. You have to get there and experience it, and then you'll know what it's all about. So it's reversed. And this involves ego judgment, setting you up for an ego judgment, to look back at the past and say, I didn't like it, or I did like it, or whatever evaluation. It's part of the meaninglessness trap that the ego sets up. It's a disorganized approach where there's no positive goal at all going in to each and every situation of your life. And so you'll recognize the folk wisdom that's been said 1,000 times.
Thank you there.
That if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And so that's the ego's recommendation, that you continue in that modality of not knowing and taking whatever path happens to be your way. We are undoing that blank, mindless approach and invoking Holy Spirit's goal for truth in our affairs. Comments? This is so simple. David?
Without a clear-cut positive goal set at the outset, the situation just seems to happen and makes no sense until it has already happened. Then you look back at it and try to piece together what it must have meant. And you will be wrong. Not only is your judgment in the past, but you have no idea what should happen. No goal was set with which to bring the means in line. And now the only judgment left to make is whether or not the ego likes it. Is it acceptable, or does it call for vengeance? The absence of a criterion for outcomes set in advance makes understanding doubtful and evaluation impossible.
So I just, because this is middle December here, and there obviously are dinner parties and events that people get invited to. You might get an invitation. So let's say you and someone else are going to one of these invitations. You accepted the invitation, you're going there. And it would be easy to think, well, what is this for? If you didn't think about it, you didn't have this message, and just say, we're going there to meet some people and have fun. I mean, I operated upon that assumption a lot. Now, and then when you drive home, you talk it through. Did you have a good time? Did you enjoy it? Or maybe you have some judgments around what happened there, whether or not the ego liked it or didn't like it, whether or not you found some people there to be enjoyable company or not. This is common. We're looking to raise the bar from having no criteria set in advance and then evaluating the situation afterwards. We're looking to reverse that, raise the bar, engage a higher purpose, the Holy Spirit's plan for truth, and become part of that. It's a prayer to join with her at every opportunity in allowing the situation to be used for Holy Spirit's purpose. Comments? Okay, David.
The value of deciding in advance what you want to happen is simply that you will perceive the situation as a means to make it happen. You will therefore make every effort to overlook what interferes with the accomplishment of your objective and concentrate on everything that helps you meet it. It is quite noticeable that this approach has brought you closer to the Holy Spirit's sorting out of truth and falsity. The true becomes what can be used to meet the goal. The false becomes the useless from this point of view. The situation now has meaning, but only because the goal has made it meaningful.
Mm-hmm. This is the turnaround. So we've decided in advance our intention, and now this situation is an opportunity to, we call it the means to make it happen. Is this situation is an opportunity, and somehow there will be a means provided to make that opportunity happen. Here's this involves selective attention. You don't have, once you've decided in advance your goal, you've already decided what you will attend to. So you concentrate on everything that helps you fulfill your intention, and you overlook everything that interferes. It's a selective attention to things. This really works. Trust me, this really works. I'll give an example in just a moment here. So, so that which is helpful to you to meet the goal is true in that moment, is real, and the useless just doesn't receive any of your valuing, any of your meat. And so now, because there is truth in the situation now has meaning because the goal itself is meaningful. So let me take a comment from Susie.
Okay, so I think I'm just kind of had an aha moment and starting to get it because I was a little bit confused. And if we're always supposed to be love and only love is real, I really got it when you said about going to the party. And the ego's intention is, oh, we're going to go have some fun and maybe see who's there and hang out. And then you're coming home and it's like, oh, well, this one was that way and this one was that way. It wasn't fun at all. But if my intention is to go to be a miracle worker and to have a sense of love and peace and goodwill and appreciation and gratitude, I'm going to have a far different experience. And maybe there's going to be somebody there that needs some help, or I'm just going to have I'm going to have a way different mindset walking into anything. Even if I'm going to play, which I'm not now, but let's say I'm going to play golf. Well, really, my ego's intention would be to play a great game and have a great score. But if my intention was to go as just love, and my whole experience might be different, will be different probably. So I kind of think, is that where we're heading with this?
We are, yes,
Right.
yes. So thank you for clarifying that. Yes, that's where we're headed. So here's an example that I've had. Let's say you're learning this course and learning to accept and forgive other people regardless of their behavior is one of the things you know that you are right on that edge trying to make that a part of your life. And you decide at the part before going to the party that that's what you want to do, regardless of what happens there. You want to forgive and accept people for who they truly are, not just for their behavior. And I've gone to parties like that, and things are, like if somebody exhibits behaviors that aren't consistent with the way I was raised, and I don't like them, used to bother me. And I find to go there, and that has just like it's water off a duck's back. I don't focus on it. Instead, I really have done this. I've gone to a party hoping to get an answer to a spiritual question that I had. And when other people would speak, I would hear things in their communication that normally I wouldn't attend to, but because I was looking to that answer, I listened to them as if they were speaking symbolically to me about my question. And it's amazing how this works. David, thanks for your patience. I saw your hand up.
No worries. So a couple of things jump out at me. You talk about, in the previous paragraph, we talk about looking at things through the past and evaluating things by looking back. And we say that everything happens in our best interest. But we don't know how that occurred until we connect the dots backward necessarily. Now, you mentioned my favorite man, Jim Rohn, one of my favorite men.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn, who I just used to listen to all the time.
Yeah.
And Jim Rohn was one of the great teachers for how to set a goal.
Yes.
And what this is for me, this is talking about goal setting here. And in this course, our goal setting is, to find inner peace, to extend love, to extend inner peace. And those are very Holy Spirit goals.
Yes.
And what this tells me is, and as Jim Rohn always said, whatever goal you focus on,
yes,
that is where you will head. It's like if you're a race car driver, they always say, look where you want to go. Don't look at your gears and your stuff in the car. You got to keep your eyes focused on the goal ahead, where you're going,
Yes.
in order to stay the path. And that's what I'm getting out of this, is that in order to stay the path of the Holy Spirit's purpose, everything will happen for me if I am focused on that goal. And I will ignore the stuff that doesn't seem to apply to it. It won't bring me, like, it won't bring me down. It won't trigger my ego if my vision is, if I'm seeing with the vision of the eyes of God.
Indeed, everything that doesn't fit with your purpose becomes useless and discarded. No attention is given it. No, you summarized that very well, David. I'm really, yeah. Jim Rohn, he's was ahead of his time, and wow, what a teacher. So we're not saying that this overall framework is different or new. What we're just suggesting is that you practice it consistently. What for? What this thing I'm about to do, what is it for? And that you think of the Holy Spirit's purpose in that framework. What are we in this situation for? Which I didn't learn from Jim Rohn, because I came up with 100 goals that I had, and they were all, or for the most part, they were self-initiated goals. Many of them would be helpful to others, but they came out of my repertoire. Here, we're joining with the Holy Spirit and drawing from her goal of truth and bringing her general goals down into our specific situations. So that's philosophically where we're fine-tuning this goal setting. Really, there's no new goals under the sun. The Holy Spirit's already figured out all that needs to happen for peace and love to prevail and the entire sonship to return home. We are just applying those goals that the Holy Spirit's identified to our situation. And now this is what frees us. The situation now has meaning because of the goal. So even if in a situation I go to a party, if in, let's say, worst case, there's a fire in the house and the whole evening gets disrupted by fire and smoke, rather than as you go home, you say, what a disaster. If your situation, your goal initially is set up, it can still be a meaningful evening. Yes, on human terms, it's unfortunate there was a fire, but nobody got hurt. We all came through it. All right, this too shall pass, we'll recover. So you can still find victory in situations that the ego would judge a disaster. Like maybe your body gets injured, and the ego would judge that as in its own terms. And you can say, well, if you pledge your body as a vehicle of communication for the Holy Spirit, I can still communicate. Julia, you had your hand up?
As you guys are talking, what I'm realizing is that sometimes or many times I go into a situation and I don't consult with the Holy Spirit, and I just, wander into it. Or if I get a little something from the Holy Spirit, I tell the Holy Spirit, shut up, I can handle this, or I don't want to hear it. And I just bumble into the situation and end up you know, like all of this says. And I realize I'm just realizing the importance of it.
Yeah. And it's not saying that you're predicting the future, okay? So we're just a little clarification here. We're not trying to say, oh, well, this situation's going to work out the way I think it's best. We're really elevating our consciousness to say, Holy Spirit, what in your plan and purpose is this situation for? How can we move your agenda forward here? And so it doesn't mean that one has a script worked out, but a general plan to be helpful, to forgive, to understand, to be at peace and shine peace.
Sometimes at Christmas time, I've been invited by my son to go to some kind of Christmas party, people I don't know. There's going to be alcohol there. There's going to be just a lot of superficial conversation, which I have trouble with. So I usually find somebody I can get into an interesting or deep conversation with, and I just hang with that person. And then it occurs to me, well, my goal is to connect with people and not be separate. I mean, I can't connect with superficial very well, but I can find somebody with a common interest or something, and that helps me through the evening.
Well, you and I share that commonality of I don't have a high tolerance for superficial content. But I can spend all evening talk about the things that are meaningful. Susie?
You know, I have a feeling this might be coming up in the upcoming paragraphs. I'm not sure, but even like in a job interview, where obviously there's a human goal, a mortal goal, body goal. And I mean, we have to work and make money and stuff like that. But if I can go in a space of love and light, right, and non-judgment of the person that's sitting interviewing me, and just know that I do not perceive my own interests, and just be right-minded and trust in the outcome, that whatever it is, it's what's in my best interest, that would put me in a far better light mindset than being in that human fear of a job interview. So that's what's coming up for me. Some of these situations we're in, that are very fearful for some.
Yes.
Or goal-oriented in this world.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Back in, well, these ideas were been described by some sociologists as the difference between being outer directed, show up to the situation and see what it offers, and then we'll figure out how we're going to participate in it. That's outer directed. What this is advocating is being inward directed. Determine in advance what your intention is. What's this for? I'm aligned with the Holy Spirit. And then show up with that purpose and intention. It's an inner directed orientation. The entire Course of Miracles is an inner directed orientation. This is a way of applying it to situations. And the biggest thing is to practice it consistently until it becomes your default mode. David?
The goal of truth has further practical advantages. If the situation is used for truth and sanity, its outcome must be peace. And this is quite apart from what the outcome is. If peace is the condition of truth and sanity and cannot be without them, where peace is, they must be. Truth comes of itself. If you experience peace, it is because the truth has come to you, and you will see the outcome truly, for deception cannot prevail against you. You will recognize the outcome because you are at peace. Here again, you see the opposite of the ego's way of looking. For the ego believes the situation brings the experience. The Holy Spirit knows that the situation is as the goal determines it and is experienced according to the goal.
Mhm. So it just rings this last line, miracle perspective. The Holy Spirit knows that the situation is as the goal determines it, and that your experience will be according to the goal. And that in every situation, there is a lesson that God would have me learn. It's a learning journey, a learning opportunity. Whether my ego judges the situation positively or neutrally or negatively matters not to my ability to learn from the situation. Matter of fact, I've often found myself learning the most from the very difficult situations, because it causes me really to look at it. Whereas if I had a pleasant time, quickly forgotten and move forward, but difficult times, I tend to look back on and wonder, how did that happen? So in every situation, there's a lesson. And so the goal here, again, will affect your entire feelings and sense of, was that worthwhile? It will affect the way you view the outcome. Julia?
Just another example of upside down thinking, or
Oh, you went mute there, honey.
I said just another example of how the ego is upside down.
It
thinking.
is. It is. Yeah, that theme resonates constantly. Jane?
I think it's, for me, it's in the being in the corporate world for so long, and being a manager and having to interview people forever and ever. For my own self, though, when I interviewed, I tried to remember I want it to be the best for both of us. I want to take the Holy Spirit with me. So the Holy Spirit is with both of us. And I don't want the job if at the end it's not going to be good for the company. And I don't want the company to have to put up with somebody that's not qualified if I'm interviewing for people to join the company. So it's asking for the best for both situations, or both parties, and not just me. It's never just about me in the course. It's always about everyone. And because we're all the same and we all have the same mind. And believe it or not, even if we don't think that, the interviewer and the interviewee are the same. So we both want the same, we both have the same goal in mind usually.
Yes. Yes.
And that's just on a practical form level, which is certainly important, but the most important part is on the content of how the experience goes. And it's only if we give it to the Holy Spirit, because only the Holy Spirit's going to extend the love of God for us.
That's great. Really good application for that, Jane. Thank you. David, you had your hand up?
I do, because you said if we ever get insights, to bring it up. And this chapter that we're reading, this has gotten me into, this may sound silly to everybody else and stuff, but in the beginning, you say, and what is your intention? What is your intention? And I always would say, heck, do we always have to articulate an intention? It's a week, a day, 3 times a week, we're articulating an intention. And, my intention is to be at peace and to remain at peace. But here it is, you see, because we set the goal. That is the intention. And, the name of this chapter is Setting the Goal. And I set the goal by stating my intention. And I am made to look at an intention within the confines and concept of the Holy Spirit and this course.
Yes.
And so therefore, you are leading me to look how to bring truth into my intention. And instead of saying, oh, I intend to, some days I say, well, I intend to pay attention. Well, that's not a very good intention, really. That's not an intention that's imbued with faith and spirit and peace and love. So I really get that from this. So thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that the ego gets uncomfortable when you ask for its intention. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to have an intention here. And it's a risk on my part of repeating that because it makes the ego uncomfortable, and not everybody accepts that. But in the long run, it causes people to start to think in terms of what is my intention, and begin to develop this simple practice. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, David. Julia, was that your hand, or is that you just acknowledging David's
I was
comment?
yes and David, because I've been irritated with you too. And
So
now I'm going to be appreciative.
So this is an opportunity for me to acknowledge that as an instructor, I take risk from time to time that may make you mildly, my intent is to just mildly nudge you rather than hammer it, mildly nudge you so that you have that, really it's an internal struggle that then goes on within the self between these questions. And that may wind up being projected outward onto me as I'm making you uncomfortable. And all of that is true from one perspective, but it does have an intent and purpose as well. And so if it's ever too much, see me privately. You might cause me to rethink about these things. But
no, I don't want you to change anything. I understand that it is my ego that is not just anyway, blah, 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 blah.
Right. Yeah. It is true that the entire Course of Miracles makes the ego uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, this is just part of the journey. The ego is not going to love what's going on here. Jane, you had a comment?
I think for most of us, the word goal is very loaded. As children, or you are supposed to win your football game or your soccer game, or you're supposed to have the goal to get all A's or get all, so I think it's pretty loaded. Yeah. Because it's not about getting A's with peace and sanity. It's just about getting A's. And in most cases, you might not have peace or sanity trying to get the A. So I think it's a pretty loaded word.
Yes. Yes.
But isn't there a distinction here that this is the goal of the Holy Spirit,
Right.
not the goal of the ego mind?
Yes. It's
Absolutely. You're
It's,
absolutely
it's
right.
a reversal of the world's goals, the ego's goals. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, Susie. Yeah.
Because that word is like ego loves that word, you
Right.
know.
Teaching moment based on what Susie just said. I maintain every word in the course, the ego will seek to define, oh, this is what that means. And yet there is another way of looking at this from the Holy Spirit. So it can be goal, it can be salvation, it can be peace. That the ego will always have its own version. And so we always want to recognize there's two views here. Go ahead, Jane.
Well, the ego's goal is always, or whatever the word is going to be looking outside for the definition of it and the meaning of it. Whereas the Holy Spirit's, if you look with the Holy Spirit, you only look from within. So the word will have lots and lots of different meanings for you. And that's why we have to take them inside to see what the real truth is for us, because the outside is not going to bring us the truth. I don't think.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on. We have one or two more paragraphs.
The goal of truth requires faith. Faith is implicit in the acceptance of the Holy Spirit's purpose, and this faith is all-inclusive. Where the goal of truth is set, there faith must be. The Holy Spirit sees the situation as a whole. The goal establishes the fact that everyone involved in it will play his part in its accomplishment. This is inevitable. No one will fail in anything. This seems to ask for faith beyond you and beyond what you can give. Yet this is so only from the viewpoint of the ego. For the ego believes in solving conflict through fragmentation and does not perceive the situation as a whole. Therefore, it seeks to split off segments of the situation and deal with them separately, for it has faith in separation and not in wholeness.
Now, this is fascinating and goes deeper still. It was perhaps a week ago, David, when you shared about offering forgiveness and a blessing to others, and you commented that you yet to be able to extend that to the entire sonship, but working on it one person at a time, to paraphrase you. Was that reasonably accurate? I think so.
That's a reasonably accurate
Yes.
review.
Okay, so let's take that as one paradigm. I'm able to forgive and work to, try to forgive and apply myself to forgiving this one person here in this specific situation. That's one paradigm. And now the other paradigm, which seems to be beyond our current faith borders, would be where the situation, the Holy Spirit sees the situation as a complete whole, as a complete plan for atonement for the entire sonship. She encompasses the completion, and everyone's involved. Everyone plays their part in accomplishing that position. No one fails in anything. So there's these two views, the macro view, that all time and space, all of life is operating towards a Holy Spirit's goal of atonement. And then there's the other view where we can't see that. We'll call it the viewpoint of the ego, that views things through fragmentation. This is a general principle that's really helpful to get. The ego would view forgiving one brother as fragmented and separate from the whole. If I'm concentrating on an issue with one person, the ego thinks it just affects me and that person. Because the ego does not perceive the situation as a whole, and it splits off the specific situation into segments and tries to deal with them separately. So what we're really saying is, David, is when you forgive one person, you are participating in a miniature of the forgiveness of everything. Not saying you had every person in mind when you forgive one, but it's a miniature, it's as Jane calls it, it's a hologram of the entire framework. And it's not fragmented or separate, it's a part of the big picture. So, David, you want to comment?
Yes, I want to just say something because I had a miraculous experience, and that is, you know, when I brought that up, that thing, and I talked about it, you know, and I sort of made some deferential comments about my inability to extend and stuff like that, and doing that, all right, exposing myself like that and sharing that uncomfortableness and that questioning my worth in a lot of ways has allowed a lot of discussion to occur about this, and has allowed me now to see it in an entirely different way, and to understand not only that when I forgive one, I'm forgiving the sonship in that sense, but to actually have a different experience of the wholeness, and the wholeness of the sonship, and the wholeness of everything that's going on here, which I didn't have before. And if I hadn't said that, if I hadn't taken the risk and exposed myself like that, I would not have had that growth, that experience, that holy instant, which rocketed me into another dimension in how I viewed that. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks. And encourage others in that way.
You're rocketed into the fourth dimension. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for allowing us to use that comment as a teaching framework here. Susie?
So, Jonica, I have a question. So these first few 3-4 sentences, does this sort of apply to what I was saying about the job interview? If my goal is just to be under the laws of God, right? Or to be right-minded, it requires a lot of faith, and whatever the outcome is just the outcome. And because the Holy Spirit sees the whole, that I'm not attached to the outcome, because I truly believe that the Holy Spirit knows what's best for me.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I was going, you know, that's how I was taking in those sentences to that specific situation. So, you know, it's Mick Jagger. You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need, you know? I mean, it's my ego's desire is probably most times not what the Holy Spirit sees best for me.
Most times.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a big undoing. It's a big reversal from the viewpoint of the ego to the viewpoint of the Holy Spirit. And this theme that's right here about these two viewpoints, one fragmented thinks that this situation is just between you and me and nobody else. And the other, the Holy Spirit's view, and says, well, what you do in this situation is what you do in life. This is a miniature of the whole healing journey. This distinction will come up in every chapter once you're looking for it. So every time it says that you do this with one brother as you do with the whole, now you realize that this is what they're referring to. Let's see, in the New Testament, this theme is 2,000 years old, at least, or more, perhaps. Jesus said, as you do unto one of these little ones, you do unto me. As you do with one, you do, that's how you treat people. So it's the reason why we're dwelling on this is because we're encouraging a shift from fragmented, segmented perspective into wholeness. And wholeness has to be learned. We weren't raised viewing things in terms of wholeness, but we can learn them as we're doing right now. Jane?
I just want to say that what David did is really the foundation of the course, is being humble, humility. And because in his sharing, it wasn't just humility, but that's the main foundation, but it's also honesty. He's living what he is practicing, and that takes away fear, takes away the guilt. And it like he expressed it, I can't express it the lovely way he did, but it did give him an experience of something that he'd never, or maybe he had, I don't mean to say never, but that a new seeing, a new experience for him. And I just thought it was wonderful. Thank you.
Confronted with any aspect of the situation that seems to be difficult, the ego will attempt to take this aspect elsewhere and resolve it there. And it will seem to be successful, except that this attempt conflicts with unity and must obscure the goal of truth. And peace will not be experienced except in fantasy. Truth has not come because faith has been denied, being withheld from where it rightfully belonged. Thus do you lose the understanding of the situation the goal of truth would bring. For fantasy solutions bring but the illusion of experience, and the illusion of peace is not the condition in which truth can enter.
Mm-hmm. I wish to acknowledge that in reading this before class, that I was bewildered and really wanted to try to make any understanding at all, especially where it says the ego will attempt to take this aspect elsewhere and resolve it there. I was unable to make any connection, but as David was reading it just now, it all connected to me, but it did it through an image. When a tiger that goes out and hunts other animals for food will often drag its kill back, because it wants to continue to eat this, will drag its kill back to its eating place where it won't be interfered by other animals. And I just saw the ego, when it identifies opportunity for a conflict, it wants to drag that into its own fantasy world, into its own environment, where it feels comfortable and churn, you know what I'm talking about, and then let it churn and grind and all that goes on, all that tearing of flesh that the ego wants to do. The ego will attempt to take the issue elsewhere and resolve it there. It'll take it into its fantasy world, into its cave of darkness, and attempt to resolve the situation under its own terms. And peace will not be experienced. The ego will not resolve it except in fantasy. So that's an insight I just had. I'm sure there are other ways of understanding it. It's because we are talking about the illusion of peace, where the ego gets what it wants. The illusion of peace, which can only occur under the framework, the viewpoint that the ego has set up. And this course is all about taking your problems into the other framework where the Holy Spirit has determined the parameters. And you're just like an innocent child that shows up with your problems, and the Holy Spirit resolves it within her framework. David?
You know, they said it is, we are taught that we are of one mind, and that what one extends, when we extend to another, that we become of one mind. I'm going to tell you something that's really bizarre. When I read that, that was the image that I had in my mind of an animal, not necessarily a tiger, but of somebody dragging something aside and wrestling with it there. So that was my interpretation as I read it, and you just, it went right to you. I find that interesting.
Yeah. These things happen a lot when you're working with the course, because you're starting to dissolve what seems like separate minds. Framework dissolves into a one mind framework. You can read more about this in the teacher's manual about what could be labeled as psychic phenomena. And so I align with the teacher's manual. It's going to happen many times, David. We recognize it, and then we move on, rather than pursue it as a form of entertainment, or let's try to do that some more here now. Let's try to set that as our goal. Yeah, these things happen a lot, especially amongst people that are lowering the walls of their ego and able to join together like we do here. The thoughts, it's one of the best demonstrations that there's really one mind that we all share.
The substitutes for aspects of the situation are the witnesses to your lack of faith. They demonstrate that you did not believe the situation and the problem were in the same place. The problem was the lack of faith, and it is this you demonstrate when you remove it from its source and place it elsewhere. As a result, you do not see the problem. Had you not lacked faith that it could be solved, the problem would be gone. And the situation would have been meaningful to you because the interference in the way of understanding would have been removed. To remove the problem elsewhere is to keep it, for you remove yourself from it and make it unsolvable.
Mm-hmm. So we're still talking about that same image that David and I both picked up on, where ego drags its issue, its judgment away, and into the dark, takes the problem elsewhere in order to savor it, in order to keep it and remove yourself from the situation. Holy Spirit does not support any of that. And so what we're told here is the reason why that happens is due to a lack of faith. And so it may happen even if you set the goal of healing before you go into a situation, that you may along the way lose sight of your purpose and temporarily allow the trash to distract you, and your focus goes elsewhere. And so that's why we practice. No one says that we've mastered this as yet. And so be sure that if that happens, you are kind and gentle with yourself. We're not grading anybody here. It's a learning opportunity. Be kind. This is the holiday season. Be kind and gentle with yourself and forgiving the way the Holy Spirit would. So again, there's always a choice. The situation can be seen as meaningful in terms of the Holy Spirit's goal, or lacking meaning because of lack of faith.
There is no problem in any situation that faith will not solve. There is no shift in any aspect of the problem, but will make solution impossible. For if you shift part of the problem elsewhere, the meaning of the problem must be lost, and the solution to the problem is inherent in its meaning. Is it not possible that all your problems have been solved, but you have removed yourself from the solution? Yet faith must be where something has been done and where you see it done.
Wow, so that actually invites a lot of discussion. We will be reading this again on next weekend's classes, because we're going to do this section next weekend. But realize that regardless of how the ego would define any situation and its problems, that in truth, there's no problem that faith cannot solve. So it's two different viewpoints. Again, if you fragment away from the Holy Spirit's plan and start to think in narrow, segmented consciousness, the problem looms large. But if you realize that I'm here in this situation for a reason, and the Holy Spirit's plan is operative now, and that I can participate in it if I'm willing, then faith can solve that problem. And so no matter what you do over the next 2 weeks, whatever situation you may find yourself in, realize that there's an invitation there to participate in the Holy Spirit's plan. It's a miniature of a much larger plan. And the more you open up to inviting her into it, the more you'll start to see the larger plan. As we read earlier, the Holy Spirit sees the situation as a whole, as a complete totality. Susie?
So this reminds me about what we talked about right in the beginning before the class started, how I just have a lightness around this physical situation I'm in. And I just, like, everything happens in my best interest, and I don't know. And there's a lesson in every, just like you said, in everything, there's a lesson. for me to learn. And I have faith that this is all happening in my best interest for a reason. I don't know, you know, time for more study, time for more, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm like all open and light and open to it. Now, in the past, my ego would be finding all the things I can't do, you know, and that's what it reminds me of. But you have removed yourself from the situation. But have you removed? So my ego would be removing myself from the solution. The solution's already here, and it's just a miracle that my mind is where it is in this just light of ease and peace in what would have in the past been a very difficult struggle. And it's just not even a struggle. And it's a little freaky, but I told you in the beginning of class, I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great note, I think, to draw this time together to a close. So.